Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Resilience Reflex Show. I'm your host, Zaheen Nanji. And again, this is episode number 9. And if you have missed the last 8 episodes, which I have had great, amazing guests who have gone through adversity, who have overcome obstacles, and if you're looking for that boost, make my show a habit, all right? In fact, make it a marathon, just like you make Breaking Bad and God knows which other TV shows out there on Netflix, right? So make this one on Hangouts a habit or a marathon. Okay, so today I have a great guest, and as usual, we only have 30 minutes, and the time flows so quickly. But I want to get you to go into the corner there, where I have a new opt-in gift for you. If you were to opt in into my website right there, zaheennanji.com, you get this free opt-in where you get 6-week series on thriving in the midst of change. I mean, there's so much change going on, right? Whether it's your job, whether it's your career, whether it's your relationships, whether it is just the journey that you're going through within. There is so much change that we can have in different areas of our life. But change is, I would say, I love change. Change is awesome because I'm always creating. I'm always looking for something in that change. So thriving in the midst of change is a great 6-week audio series that you can get for free when you go on my website. Another thing, you don't have to opt in, but you can go and read my blogs. There you go. You can give me a little heart back, okay? So go and read my blogs because there's, again, awesome, great stuff that you can start working on just by reading my blogs. There you go. Okay, so today we have with us Abe Brown, and Abe is a dear friend of mine. He is my mentor as well, and he's also been my coach. And Abe is in Calgary, Alberta, and he, like I said, is a master coach. But let me just say some things about him that I can read off of his website. He's the founder and the president of Momentum Coaching, and he's had that since 2007. He is a business leader and manager since 2006, where he has helped a lot of businesses go up to 25 million in annual revenue. You got to teach me that. and up to 150 employees. He is also an administrator, counselor, since 1993, and he's a devoted family man and a hobbyist. In fact, Abe just had a new family member 8 months ago, and I see her pictures on Facebook, and she's an angel, Abe. Oh my God, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so I'm just going to read some things here that we kind of talked about, breaking free of fear. And if I can just, read the stats that you sent me here. About half of Americans feel that the stress has increased over the past 5 years. About half of Americans report lying awake at night due to stress. I say, whenever I speak out there and I'm on stage speaking to people, or I'm doing some kind of training, I'll say, that S word that we use 24/7, it's not the 3-letter word, it's the 5-letter word, right? So yeah, it's used 24/7, But I liked what you said about yourself, that you too have gone through profound breakthrough in the area of worry, stress, anxiety, and fear. Due to the pain of your past, there was a time when all these 3 things, right, like worry, stress, anxiety, and fear were all he knew, and so he thought it was normal. Abe started to discover that he was not alone. I like when you say that worry warped you, stress enslaved you, anxiety attacked you, and fear trapped you. And I've been there too, Abe, where I stuttered up to my early 20s, and I never spoke a word because I was scared of how I would look to others. So let me start right away by asking you, why is there so much fear, stress, worry, and anxiety these days?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, I think if I knew the answer completely to that, I'd be rich, But I think part of it is because we've gotten away from some of the solutions that used to work in the past, right? I mean, being grounded spiritually, having healthy relationships, being attached to community, right, that would nurture us and that would support us and that would help us to cultivate, resilience. We live in a society that is very fragmented, right? And our role models, they're not even real role models, right? They're Photoshop, plastic, sort of Hollywood definition. And so if I live my life, comparing myself to what the rich and famous have, and I think, well, I don't have all of that, therefore there must be something wrong with me. Of course, that's going to lead me to a place of pretty significant anxiety and stress and fear, right? So, it's prevalent. I think, not to give you too long of an answer, but I also think a huge part of it is we have sort of defaulted to a pharmaceutical response, right? And so somebody's got stress and they've got anxiety. Well, you must have an anxiety disorder. And how do we fix disorders? Well, we medicate them. And I'm not in any way suggesting that at times that's not appropriate, but it has become a bit of a default mechanism in the medical community rather than teaching people the skills to cope, right? Teaching people the skills to manage in a way that's going to, keep them healthy rather than make them unhealthier.
Mm-hmm. I completely agree with that, Abe. And I have a wellness center, and the people that come through, I can't imagine and, believe that when they fill out their health form, when they come in, I would say half or over half are on antidepressants.
Mm-hmm.
And do you find that, like the way you were saying, that they're just getting something that's a solution that's for a short term instead of teaching them how to cope, right?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting you asked that because I was in a coaching session with one of my clients 2 days ago, and a very successful woman, makes a lot of money, has a big job in a big company, and we were walking through some of her desire to develop leadership skills. And this was what was funny, is that in the middle of that she started talking about how she's on antidepressants and how she's been also diagnosed at a certain point with an anxiety disorder, and so she's also taking some medication to help her with that. And she's a very high level person, and certainly I didn't say, hey, stop doing the medication, but what I asked her was, does it help? And her level of self-awareness to me was quite profound. She said, what it does is it keeps me level, but it doesn't deal with the real problem. And actually part of why I'm here looking for coaching is I need to get beyond that, right? Because the medication, thank God for it. If somebody needs to be leveled out, good. But we've got to go deeper than that, right? It's really meant to be a temporary, crutch until such time as you're able to build back resilience into your life.
Yeah. So I'm interested, and I'm sure that the viewers are, in your story. How is it that fear, anxiety affected you?
Well, I mean, it's kind of an interesting thing. I wasn't really aware that it was such a problem for me. I think it was just the way that I grew up, and I just assumed I was normal. That's one of the funny things, right? We all look around at everyone else and we think, well, they're weird, and I'm the normal one here. And of course, you come to a place of maturity, and you start to realize, hey, I live like trapped by anxiety. So, I guess my story, I mean, I grew up in a family that was really broken. Of course, had an extremely loving mother, but she was young. She really didn't know how to parent. She did the best she could. She was a single mom. Had my brother when she was 17. Ended up having me 2 years later. Was put out on the street by her parents with 2 kids and a grade 10 education, and then ended up, kind of attracting men who weren't, that healthy, right? When you're in a difficult place, you don't always attract the best kind of people. And so these men were angry, and they were alcoholic, and they were abusive, and of course, not just to my mom, but also to my brother and to myself. And so, I grew up, not only experiencing that, but then also, kind of in extreme poverty. Grew up just outside of Toronto, and ended up, really not having enough. It's something we don't often think of in Canada, but a lot of people do grow up without, a lot of the basic necessities. And so, I started my first part-time job when I was about 8 years old to help, put food on the table. So I think, I always grew up with this overriding sense of anxiety. And that was all about, feeling inadequate, wondering, will people accept me? Will people see the value in me? And of course, the answer was always no, right? So I had to work really hard, to get it. And sometimes I succeeded, and sometimes I didn't. But no matter how much, in terms of accolades or, affirmation people gave me, I still had a core within that was searching and that was looking, and it led me to fear. All kinds of things, right? I was afraid of failure. I was afraid of success. I was afraid of relationships. I was afraid of rejection. I was afraid of being inadequate, and that, gripped my life.
So there was a point, though, in your life where you started to overcome that fear then? Or there were different points, I guess.
Yeah, I think, it was interesting because, as I came to a level of realization, it was actually through a bit of a crash that I went through in my early 30s. And, it involved, my marriage at the time. It involved my work. And, it's funny because I was helping so many other people in my role, because I was a counselor, I was a speaker. At the time, I was a pastor in a church and traveling all around, and I was in demand, and people thought I was great. And, I have a master's degree in counseling. So, I really thought that I was okay because I had gone through a process to address my pain. But what I didn't deal with, and this is what I didn't know, was the programming. And there's a lot of people who go through pain, and they go see a therapist, they see a counselor, and perhaps, they address the pain. It's not so traumatic, it's not so acute. They don't, live, crying all the time. But the programming, is still there, and that is kind of how our thoughts and our beliefs are all forming together to create our current reality internally. And so I started a process of changing that, because, I didn't want to be that guy, who, wasn't, living a healthy life with healthy programming.
Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm.
So in your book that you just released, the ebook, Breaking Free of Fear, and I know I've been watching your, videos too. I want you to tell the viewers about the 6 major types of fear that you include in there. Yeah, and while you do that, I'm just going to make some notes.
Okay, go for it.
Okay.
The first thing I want to say about fear is there are 6 major types of fear, but when I think about fear, I always sort of categorize it into 2 main categories, and one is a healthy, rational fear, and that's let's say the doctor says to you, hey, you got to lose some weight, otherwise you're going to have a heart attack. And you may be feeling afraid. And that in that situation is probably a healthy fear because it's going to motivate you to change. An unhealthy, irrational fear would be, I don't know, a fear of spiders, right? There's, 50,000 species of spiders in North America, and maybe 3 or 4 of them can actually hurt us. And yet, when you see a spider, the reaction is, oh my God, right? So what that is a programmed response of irrationality, right? And so, when we think about our fears, we've got to realize that actually some fear is good. But in the types of fear that aren't healthy, the irrational types, the first one is what I call the fear of failure. And that one's huge, right? When you fear failure, you're reluctant to step out and try anything, right? And of course, this is all about your sense of worth, right? When my worth is tied to my performance, the fear of failure is the natural result, because if I don't perform, well, I must not be worth it, right?
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, the fear of success is the second type of fear. And there's a lot of people who actually fear both, right? And what I call the fear of success, or how I describe it, is it's really the fear that if I succeed one time, everyone's going to expect me to maintain it, right? And I
Yes.
might not be able to maintain it, so
Yes.
it's better for me to stay at an average level or a low level rather than to step into that high level, because I might not be able to maintain this success. And again, this is about our worth, and it's about our value. Another fear is the fear of inadequacy. And, this is really the fear that I might not be good enough. And this one is interesting, and not to get too funky, but this can be inadequacy in relationships. It can be inadequacy when it comes to working a job. It can be inadequacy sexually, right? It can be inadequacy, when it comes to standing on a stage and delivering a speech to a room filled with people. But it's that fear that when I am called upon to deliver, I might not make it, right? And of course, that traps people. Right?
So I'm just going to stop you there, and I'm just going to recap the three, fears that we talked about.
Yeah.
So for the visual people, here you go. It's the fear of failure. I know my handwriting is kind of weird, but there you go. Well, it's kind of good, but it is. Okay, yeah. Okay.
Better than mine.
So the fear of failure, and that's kind of tied to your worth, right? And Abe, if you want to jump in anytime, just do that. Then there's the fear of success, where that is kind of tied around that. How do I maintain that once I step into it? And then there's the fear of inadequacy, where it's kind of tied to not being good enough, right? Yeah, not being good enough. Oh, there you go. Hug me. Hug, kisses. There you go. Okay, so let's go on with the next three then.
Sure. The next one that I like to think about is the fear of rejection. And boy, this impacts people. This one cost me probably tens of thousands of dollars, simply because it's the fear that I might ask and be rejected, right? So this can affect people involved in sales. This can affect me in my dating relationships. This can affect when I'm applying for a promotion, and it's that constantly taking people's responses personally. Right, and it may not be personal, right? I mean, if I apply for a job and don't get it, it's probably not because my boss hates me, right? There's probably other factors involved. If I'm trying to sell a product and somebody declines, it's probably not because it's about me. It's probably simply due to their own situation and their own reasons, right?
Yeah.
But this fear of rejection just absolutely gripped me at one point, right? And it led me to do a lot of things to try to compensate, right? So I became a people pleaser, right? What do I need to do to get Zaheen to affirm me, right? To love me, to care for me. And in some ways it led to some pretty unhealthy relationships, right? Because when you need to be needed, that's never a healthy place to have a relationship, right?
Yeah. Oh, that is so important, because Abe, I can completely understand about the rejection part. And like you as a speaker, we contact so many people to find out if they're looking for speakers at this conference or that event. I mean, if we don't make the calls and take action, they're not going to know about us. I mean, sorry, but that's how it works. Okay.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I mean, I will call 10 to 12 people maybe in a week, and I may get 1 or 2 emails or calls back. But that doesn't mean that the other 8 did not like me or did not, maybe the head speakers already. Maybe they're going to look into me next year or 2 years down the road. But you're right. I had to come to grips with that too. I thought, oh, maybe it's me. But, in the end, I just had to say, no, it's not about me. I'm doing the best that I can, right?
Yeah, and what's interesting about this, I mean, is we all kind of give off an energy, don't we? And it's not some weird mystical thing. It's that we get around people, and some people are like super positive and super empowering, and you just want to be around them, and other people just aren't. They're negative. They feel sorry for themselves, and there's an energy about them that repels people. And when you live your life fearing rejection, what happens is that energy, right, is sort of going out there. And the very thing that you need the most, which is acceptance and people to love you and affirm you, you're actually pushing them away subconsciously. And so it's a scary thing, right? It's like, here I need this so very desperately, but because I fear rejection so much, I'm actually repelling people.
Yeah.
Right? So, there's nothing more attractive than a person who loves themselves, right? There's nothing more attractive, or sexy, if you want to use that term, than someone who's confident, and not in a cocky, egotistical way, but they're just sure of themselves, right?
Yes, right. Yes. And it does take a while to get there too. I mean, that doesn't happen overnight either.
Yeah, that's right. Takes time, and that was one of the things I learned is in the reprogramming process. Another type of fear, just two more, is the fear of the unknown. And I think, to be fair, we all have had the fear of the unknown. We've all had that fear of what's going to happen. This leads to a ton of stress for people, right? Because we can't ever predict the future. And as a result of that, it leads us to either overcompensate and overplan and try to control right, the outcome, or it leads us to completely disengage and say, well, what'll be will be, and there's nothing I can do to change anything anyway, so I'm just not going to do anything. And of course, both of those are not very healthy. We've got to find that balance, right? I mean, we can't control situations. We also can't predict the future. So what do we need to do? We need to manage, right? We need to take steps. We need to care for ourselves and be healthy people. And so that fear of the unknown can hold you back. The last one I found was pretty profound for me, particularly because of my past, but I find that it impacts people a lot today, and that's the fear of commitment, right? And of course, today, we live in a culture that doesn't always support commitment, right? And I'm not just talking about relationships or marriage. I mean, on so many levels, right? It's sort of like if you want to do something great, but then if you just want to change your mind later, just go ahead and who cares about the consequences, right?
Yeah.
It impacts us, right? It impacts relationships, it impacts businesses, it impacts, of course, marriages and relationships and families. But what I found in me was I mean, no one was better at the fear of commitment than me, People would say, hey, do you want to do this? And I'd say, well, let me think about it. And the opportunity would pass, and I'm still thinking about it, right? And I think, so many great things that I passed up, I didn't say yes to, just because I was afraid, right, of taking that step and committing. And so definitely that's something I think that, we all wrestle with maybe at one time or another.
Oh, yeah. Well, okay, so let's recap the next three here. So we talked about the fear of rejection, and I just put there, well, so what?
Right. That's great.
Yeah, and then the other one was the fear of unknown, and you say three things that really I felt was that a lot of people struggle with, which is true, which is stress, what if, control, and or you completely disengage. And then the last one was commitment, and I don't know what there. Oh, yeah, what they just pass it up because they are scared or they're not sure. But and I would like to add to that too is having a wellness center. I think this is another level where a lot of people, I think, are just doing too much, where they have appointments and then they don't show up sometimes, and they don't have the courtesy to call, or they. And I'm not saying that's everyone, but I'm saying that there's some people out there who, I don't know what it is. I think it's the fear of commitment or the fear of, I don't know what.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it holds us back because at the end of the day, it's our track record, really, that people judge us on, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I can have a great day and a great week, but people are going to look at the long term, right? And if there's a track record of broken commitments, that's going to say, quite a bit about me as a person and my character. So, yeah.
So tell me, why should we fear living in fear?
Well, I mean, it's funny if you go to my website, you'll see a couple of videos on that. But I think mainly because you remember the words of Franklin Roosevelt, who said the only thing we should fear is fear itself, right? Because fear takes you out of your rational brain, right? And it moves you into your irrational brain. And we have two brains, right? There's that rational brain that processes information and generally makes decisions that are healthy, and then there's that irrational brain that's often reactive, right? It's that brain that reacts to situations. It causes us to make decisions we regret. It causes us to say things we regret. And you know what? I don't want to be driven by fear. If I'm going to say no in a situation, it's not going to be from a basis of fear, but it's going to be from a basis of a healthy decision, right? And a fear-based decision is almost never a real healthy decision.
So then, like, it's interesting where you say that we have the two kinds of brain, the rational and the irrational.
Yeah.
So what are some strategies then to kind of stop and to go to that part of the brain that says, hold on, and to help you process that information so that you can make a good decision or take good action or something like that. What are some strategies then?
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, I think one strategy that I found is super important is working hard, and I'll give you a few that start with P, just to help it make it easy to remember. One is positive perspective. And this is really a discipline, right? It's being able to look at a situation and to frame it in a way that leads you to see it in a positive way. And you might be sitting there and you might be saying, well, Abe Brown, easy for you to say, you don't know my situation, you don't know what I'm going through. And you know what? I don't, right? I mean, there's no way I can understand what you're facing, but I know what I faced, and what I faced was pretty difficult. And somehow I learned that there were two ways of looking at any situation, and one is the way that's very negative and hopeless, right? And then the other way is the way that says, hey, as bad as it is, I can make this better. And that's positive perspective, right? That's one strategy. I think another strategy is programming, right? And specifically reprogramming, right? And because of my past, I was programmed to think of myself as inadequate. I was programmed to believe that people wouldn't give me what I needed, that I had to try to get it all on my own. I was programmed to believe that, people's love would never last. And so what that did is that mindset took me into relationships where actually I produced those kinds of results, right? It's kind of like the law of attraction, right? I actually had faith in the negative happening, right? And so guess what? The negative happened. And there I was kind of reinforcing my story. And so, I went through a process, and I'll be honest, it took me probably 18 months of relentless inner work where I kind of took myself and I saw myself as a garden. And, this was a garden that was, producing all kinds of bad fruit. But I'm the gardener, right? If I've got bad fruit in my garden, I can't blame anyone. I'm an adult. I'm not a child. So I went in and started digging up the old stuff, the unhealthy stuff. And then I started planting, right? Watching shows like yours, Zaheen, honestly, right? I mean, you have an amazing resource you're giving people. And, for people who are out there struggling, these are the types of resources, shows like this and ebooks and, podcasts and, think tools that you reprogram yourself. And no, it's not going to happen in one program or in one show, one episode, but over time, right? If you give yourself the good, that's what will come in your life. Garbage in, garbage out. But if you put the good in, the good will start to come out, right?
Yeah. Okay. So you got the two P's that I can share with people here. Okay. Oh, I'm just going to put there we go.
Right on.
Okay. So positive perspective. And what I kind of like to call that, like the way you say, to frame it. And in my book that is coming out at the end of the year,
awesome.
it actually talks about reframing things.
Okay.
And that's exactly the way you say it, that instead of thinking about, for example, a lot of people would say things like, oh, the economy is such a downturn and there's no jobs out there and things like that. But if you were to reframe that and say, well, now's the time, if you want to start your own business, you can start looking into it, right?
Yeah.
So that would be a way to reframe things, that you've always wanted to do this. Why not start now if you are, worried about your job or you've lost it or something like that, right?
Totally.
And I like the second one where you call it programming. And funny enough, the resilience reflex that I talk about, it's 3 steps. The first is release, and the second is reprogram. And it's funny that you brought that up, that yes, you have to reprogram yourself. And like Abe says, it's not an overnight thing. It took him 18 months. I mean, it took me 10 years to be able to accept and to be where I am with my body. And it took me 20 years to be able to be comfortable with the way I speak and my speech. And that's how I overcame my stuttering. That's how I became a speaker. And I can do all this kind of stuff, which I couldn't do before. Yeah. And Abe, you are amazing. I'm always looking at what you're doing, and I love what you put out there. You have a ton of information that you share with people easily and readily accessible. And if you haven't had a chance to go on his website yet, please go on it right after the show or right now, breakingfreeoffear.com. And I believe that you have the ebook there.
Yeah, so if you just go to breakingfreeoffear, like Zaheen said.com, you just opt into, give your email address, and then there's, this book here, I don't know if you can see it, but it's called 6 Strategies for Breaking Fear and Attacking Anxiety. And it's just a super helpful, it's a pretty easy read. It's only 40 pages, 45, so it's not going to take you forever. But really, I just wanted to put some tools in your hands, and the best thing about it is it's free.
Yes.
I love free.
Free, yeah.
So please take advantage of that.
Okay, awesome. Well, everyone, time flew by. It's already past 6:30. Thank you so much for watching. And like I said, if you have missed the last 8 episodes, go back and watch amazing speakers come on, authors who speak about their life. By the way, there are no shows in August. I decided to take the time off because, hey, summer is here and I want to make the most of it, and so should you, okay? So I'm taking the month off, and I'm also working on my book because it's
awesome.
The deadline's coming up. Yeah, so much to do. So join us back in September with the first show on September 6th. With Chris Lee, who is going to be talking about how he overcame his life after a major car accident and where he almost lost his life. So join us then, and until then, make my show a habit, okay? Bye-bye.